Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If you could start taking a seat, that would be fantastic. Thank you, Ian. Brad, that's it. Thank you so much, one and all, for taking a seat so promptly. It'll be great to get started. We have 3 amazing presentations tonight, and we'll definitely have some networking time afterwards. Excellent. Got it all tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking a seat. Okay. So good evening and welcome to the Sydney Mining Club event, our first Leading Edge for 2024. My name is Lucy McLean and I have the privilege and honour of chairing tonight's event. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting today on the lands of the Gadigal people and offer my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. This is an exciting occasion, and of course today, very appropriately, we will have 3 amazing presentations focused on New South Wales explorers and the future, and producers, and the future in our great state. I am especially honoured to chair tonight because, in fact, I started in this industry 20 odd years ago, let's not put a number on that, working for an unlisted explorer wholly focused in New South Wales. So it is so exciting to see the development of the industry and to then hear from our great presenters tonight. But before we dive into New South Wales, I'd first of all like to wish you all a happy International Women's Day Eve. It is actually tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you all. As the immediate past chair of Women in Mining New South Wales, which has been one of my joys and delights, it really has been an honour to support the women in the industry, and thank you for that unexpected round of applause as we go forward. But look, International Women's Day should also be a moment where we can all think not just about having a pink cupcake and a glass of pink champagne, or in fact wearing a pink jacket, as is also great. But look, it's also considering what we can all do to support the industry going forward. Because look, the research is very clear that diversity is beneficial for profitability, productivity, and of course engagement, not to mention filling all those talent shortages that we all have so many of. The latest data from our friends in government shows us that the minerals industry, in fact, continues to be the most male-dominated industry, with only 22% female participation. And the recent data shows that we have a gender pay gap of over 15%. In our companies, only 30% do not have any females on the board, and only 8% have a female CEO or in a top leadership role. We're honoured tonight that today we have just one of them. So look, I really do ask you to consider taking International Women's Day as not just the opportunity to celebrate, but also to consider what you can do to support women in the industry. As the current New South Wales and Australian champion for diversity and inclusion, it really is my role to promote this and also to really encourage you all to consider, when you go back to your lunchrooms, your team meetings, your boardrooms, what you can do to support a greater diversity in our industry. You'll even note that the Sydney Mining Club has taken a step forward by, dare I say, allowing a female to host the evening, which I believe is actually possibly, in living memory, the first time ever. Thank you, thank you. Oh, thank you. Even better, we are actually going to have a balanced panel tonight because we're going to have half females on the stage. So that is also an impressive feat for our industry, and well may it continue going forward. And so in fact this year celebrates, and this month in fact, celebrates the 27th birthday of the Sydney Mining Club. The first forum was held in March 1997, before some people in this room were born, dare I need to mention. With over 50 attendees, the speaker was Peter Robinson, and he talked about his recent takeovers by his company Renison Consolidated Goldfields. The Sydney Mining Club now meets every month except January on the first Thursday of each month with alternating lunches and evening events. But we can only do this by the generous support of our many sponsors. So you'll see the banners around the room tonight, and please take a moment to thank them if you meet them during the networking times. But I'd also like to acknowledge them one by one. So we have the AME Group, the Baird de Bar, VDA, GBA Capital, AMEC, APM, CRE, CRU, Fender Geophysics, Ioneer, Kingsgate, New South Wales Minerals Council, RAS, RFC Ambrian, Taurus, Tees and Veritas. Please give a round of thanks to our sponsors. So now to the great state of New South Wales. And of course, as many of us know, New South Wales has a very proud past and history with having the first payable gold discovery in Ophir, just a couple of hours west, in 1951. So now, over 173 years later, we're continuing in that great tradition. Today, the New South Wales mining industry, the future is bright, with many rich reserves, as you'll hear more about very soon, and a range of diverse minerals, especially minerals today and tomorrow. Of course, we have a great coal industry, but we also have such a great and bright future with the critical minerals and exciting other future-focused minerals. So the sector is vibrant with world-class deposits, a highly skilled workforce, and a reputation, very importantly, for safe, responsible and innovative mining practices. We have a government who assures us their door is open for business for our industry, and in fact we have a new critical minerals strategy that should be released very shortly. So it certainly is an exciting time. In the latest stats from the ABS, the New South Wales recorded a 28% increase in investment in gold exploration. Selected base metals were up 11% and copper was up 10%. So today we're going to hear of 3 companies who are wholly focused on our state. Our first presenter is from Alkane and really needs very little introduction. Ian Chalmers is a geologist and really simply a legend. He's worked in the mining and exploration industry for over 50 years and has had a 35-year involvement with Alkane as both technical director and managing director. He's steered the company from discovery to development of multiple gold projects in New South Wales. I'm not sure that anybody else could say that. He has also had a 30-year involvement in rare metal and rare earth industry and is managing the exciting Dubbo project, which is advancing from threshold to development. Please welcome Ian Chalmers.
Well, thank you, Lucy. Thank you for that introduction. I'm sure I didn't write that. And thank you to the Mining Club for inviting me along. I actually sat down the other day and said, I do remember being here. It's probably 10 or 15 years ago. And I think I spoke about the Dubbo Rare Metal Project, and that's not a subject I'm going to drift into tonight, other than to say it's amazing how that industry has morphed in the last 20 years from what we consider to be a special metal or specialty chemical business, and now it's called critical minerals. And it seems like half the periodic table to me these days is a critical mineral. So anyway, I'm going to give you a very high-level overview of our Voda Kaiser discovery, which is a very, very big gold copper resource. And I said, as you'll appreciate, in the last 4 years there's been a lot of time and effort put into it to get it to where it is today. Hopefully. There it is, okay. All that stuff. I think the thing that I'd really like to stress though is the bottom line. You know, these things are not individuals. There's a number of people that have worked on this project from start to finish. and they've all contributed significantly to what is, we consider to be a global significant discovery. So a little bit about the Macquarie Arc. The guys asked me to talk about Macquarie Arc and Ordovician porphyry systems, and I said, well, 15 minutes is not long enough. I probably need about 50 hours, but I'm just going to give you a short snapshot. So the interesting bits on that map, so you can see we're in the central west mostly. The green stuff is the Ordovician oceanic arc, the preserved oceanic arcs. And it's quite unusual to have Ordovician-aged rocks preserved to such an extent where they are relatively intact and relatively visible. You can see them without being smashed up totally. They are bound, mostly bound by sort of north-south structures along their margins. And the other little interesting things are those little dashed lines you can see heading from northwest to southeast. And these are transverse cross-arc structures, which are very common in big porphyry systems globally. And I think these are worth noting, and they're a lot more than they used to be. People only used to talk about the Lachlan one, which is the one down through Cadia and up to North Parks, and now we recognise a whole host of them scattered around. It is a world-class province. So let's start with what we came into the industry with, and as far as porphyries are concerned, I should have said that if I quickly jump back. Try to. No, it doesn't matter. Oh, yes, we do. So in the left centre of that, you can see the town of Tomingley, Peak Hill to the south and Dubbo to the northeast. Tomingley is a project that we've been working on. It's a gold mine. It's been operating now for 10 years. When we started out, it had a 4-year life, and currently we're in the process of extending that out for another 10 years to probably about 2032. Via some very innovative work that's been done on that project. And the total resource there today from go to wire is probably about 2.5 to 3 million ounces. So it's a nice orogenic type gold deposit. So back to porphyry. So this is the little cartoon on the left is borrowed from a Newcrest presentation a few years ago. And they tried to compress, and I thought very well, the types of porphyry systems you see in the Macquarie Arc. The pencil porphyries typified by North Parks on the left-hand side, very narrow, tight alteration systems. And then on the Cadia Ridgeway systems on the right-hand side, where you can see very large, extensive areas of alteration. And I won't go into all the detail about the geochemical signature, but that's put together by the University of Tasmania and the Codes Group. And it shows you how you can zero in on these porphyry targets by starting out at some quite distance away from the ultimate source of the material. So on to us and what we call the North Molong Porphyry Project. It's always been a mouthful, and I've always been trying to find something other way to call it, but that's what we're stuck with. And the left-hand side is the aeromagnetic map, and you can see the dashed lines being the what we call the Hunter transverse zone going through the middle. And then on the very southeast is where Boda and Kaiser are, and the magnetics really demonstrate the existence of lots of different intrusive phases in their magnetic deposits. On the right-hand side is a structural map, and it's very busy, and it is very busy, but we've recognised now the last 3 or 4 years that while you have these big alteration systems, what makes an ore body is the structural control, the structural location and driving of where the mineralisation gets focused into. And I won't go into try and explain that map, but that just shows you can see on the bottom where Boda is on the map, it's a very structurally complex area. So on to Boda and Kaiser. So what we've done since about September 2019, we've drilled something like 200,000 metres of drilling, mostly core and RC, and it's been focused on that 3.5 kilometre corridor you can see on the map on the right-hand side, Kaiser being the northwest area, and then Boda down to the south. And really, we went in and drilled some geochemical anomalies in areas where we'd actually had some shallow RC holes, and it got interesting mineralisation, nothing you'd consider economic. And then we started looking and saying, well, we think we're at the top of the system here. We basically need to be deep. We need to go in and drill some deep holes. And you can imagine, a junior resource company the size of Alkane, you start talking of kilometre holes, and you're talking about $250,000, $300,000 for a hole of that dimension. So we've started off doing that, and we've kept going. And before anybody asked me, we've spent about $50 million over the last 4 years on developing Boda and Kaiser. And again, the model, and the reason I put it up, it's a cartoon. So we're trying to synthesise a lot of information into this little slide. We're dealing with a basaltic andesitic alkalic volcanic system. We think we're at the core of a volcano, and there's a very large alteration system. It starts with a pale green. It's a outer propylitic alteration, which is just altered material. A little bit of pyrite, and then you slowly come in towards the core, towards the centre zone. You go inner propylitic, and then into the calc-potassic cores. And what we see at Boda and Kaiser are these monzonite intrusives. Most of them aren't very big, but they come through the system, but they're very distinctive, and they very much, you can see that they are the heat engine and the chemical engine that drives this mineralisation. We initially started off thinking we had a Cadia model. We thought this is a Cadia type model. As we've gone on, we now don't use those terminology anymore. We now use the Boda model because it's different. It's not exactly like Cadia. People often ask us, is it similar to Cadia? The answer is no, it's not. Apart from the fact that it's a very large volume of copper-gold mineralised rock, it's a different type of system. If we zero in on Boda, so there's the southern body. So at Boda, that red line outlines the actual resource, the identified, inferred and indicated resource that we have there. It's over a kilometre, it's probably nearly a kilometre and a half north-south. In that central north zone, it's probably close to 700, 800 metres wide. It's a very, very big system. And the cross-section, again, very difficult to simplify this cross-section, but what you see there is the green being the volcanics, or propylitically altered volcanics, the orange being the sort of monzonites, and the calc-potassic alteration. And then the mineralisation, if you look really closely, you'll see different zones of mineralisation. And it starts off being disseminated, pyrite, chalcopyrite, scattered throughout, and then it slowly becomes more concentrated. And if you can see it in the image on the right is one of the breccia zones that we we drilled, and that was nearly 100 metres of nearly 4 grams gold and 1.5% copper. That was a pretty spectacular intercept. And the more we got into it, the more we realised that these things are not huge. They're not North Park sized. They are quite lateral extensive and vertical extensive, but they're quite narrow at the same time. So they're not big systems, but they add to the overall grade and tonnage of the deposit. That zone, by the way, was 1.1 kilometres of, as you can see there, nearly over 0.55 gold and 0.25% copper. Very big. And the other little bit of interest in the bottom is we have on the eastern and northeastern flank of the alteration zone what we call a phyllic zone. And this is just pyrite mineralisation. It's got amazing gold. No copper. It's amazing, it carries gold, and you can see that intercept there. It's 400 metres of 3.3 grams gold. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you put it all into the context of this total resource, it adds significantly to it. Kaiser is, again, probably the same. It's the extension of the same system, the same alteration system, but appears to be deeper. So we see more high temperature mineralisation, we see more bornite in the system there, and you have to look very, very closely at that top image, and you can see some bornite scattered through that rock with a lot of chalcopyrite. Very impressive hydrothermal breccias. Again, same sorts of very high grades over relatively narrow intervals. And being a geologist, I had to throw in the bottom one. Some of these monzodiorites, those little pencil things I was showing you, there's one that tops out in one of the holes in Boda. And we get these meriolitic filled vesicles, and what that means is basically you're near the top of the monzonite. So you're getting all the gas and fluids that are coming off, exolving off these monzonites, and that's a very good indication of where you are in this very, very big system. There's a long section, so again, it's a cartoon in some ways, but tries to summarise what we're seeing. And you can see there, Boda's a very distinctive vertical, it's not a pipe, but it's a sort of circular focused zone of mineralisation. It's about 1.2 kilometres long, or deep rather. We've drilled it to well over 1.2 kilometres. It's still open at depth. We've got further mineralisation to the south into what we call Boda 2 and 3, and there's another higher grade patch developing at depth in Boda. And that's probably going to be about year 300 in the mine before we get to that. So, and then fortunately, Kaiser, as I said, being a deeper system, and it actually comes right to the surface, and you can see all those high grades that sit in that block. It looks a bit like a a pipe-like structure. It's, again, not really, it's just a focus and concentration of the mineralisation, but that's plunging to the north. And Kaiser certainly is a very early open cut potential. You love putting up these great tables, and I won't even try. I think the thing to notice is that the total resource on the bottom line is nearly 900 million tonnes, 0.37, I think it's 0.37 gold, 0.31 gold and 0.18 copper. Doesn't sound like a lot, but I'll show you a thing in a minute which puts it into global context, that the reality is that it's a very significant resource. And if you really want to have a hard look, look at the little bit on the bottom. It was published by Newmont about a month ago. It was their resource update, and it was for Cadia, and it was all the underground. And if you look very closely at their grades, they're not too dissimilar to what we're quoting overall for Boda and Kaiser. The diagram's on the right that says the Boda. We've broken Boda into two parts. There's a 0.3 gram cut-off and a 0.4 gram cut-off, and the 0.3 we believe will go into an open cut type operation, and then the 0.4 will become potentially a longer term underground. We haven't quite done that for Kaiser right now because we're just finishing the drilling there now, and the new resource model will probably be out by the end of early April probably. And it looks at this stage that Kaiser is probably going to be bigger and probably higher grade than what we originally thought. So I threw up these little bubble things to try to show you what a comparative porphyry system, the deposit. So the size of the circle is the volume, the tonnage. The grade you can see along the bottom is copper and the gold up on the left-hand side. The slightly pinkish ones are Australian deposits. Obviously Cadia dominates that table. And then the green ones are international deposits. And I will point out the two on the top left, Treaty Creek and KSM, are in British Columbia. That system, they're two companies, but if you combine them, they currently have a resource total of over 100 million ounces of gold. Now, these are big, big systems. When you look at some of the aerial photographs of it, you think, isn't it great to work in New South Wales? You've got nice rolling green hills, you don't have mountains and glaciers. Some of the drill sites at the KSM deposit are drilled from a glacier into the deposit. I imagine the technical difficulties that would provide. So going back in the brighter orange in the middle there is the Kaiser, Boda Kaiser body. This is prior to the upgrade that we're going through right now. So you can see grade-wise it's pretty close to Cadia. The deposit underneath, North Island, is an operating mine in British Columbia. The one on the left is also an operating mine in British Columbia. So these deposits are mined, and these grades are mined. So metallurgy, obviously very important. We've done one fairly big stage one run through, and it was surprisingly simple. Very standard crush grind circuit, flotation, simple flotation to produce a concentrate. The recoveries were sort of nearly 90% copper and probably over 80% gold overall, and it produces a very clean concentrate, extremely clean concentrate. In fact, the guys working on it said it's one of the cleanest concentrates that they've worked on. It's better than, probably, I'm getting carried away saying it's better than Cadia's concentrate in terms of grade and content. So that's all going on. We're currently working, we've got an engineering group put together a plant design. They're costing it at this time, and they're doing the operating and capital costs. And hopefully that study will be out sometime, probably maybe late April, the way it's going at this stage. Looking at all the other infrastructure, local infrastructure, power, water requirements, etc., land requirements, and all the baseline environmental data as well underway. So, a little bit, outside of the Boda Kaiser area, which is that going down the very bottom right hand of that image, there are numerous other targets. And I won't go through them all, but there's a lot of targets. We can now rate those targets according to their geochemistry, the lithochemistry, the style of rock, the alteration of that rock, and there are multiple targets. We've just completed a gravity survey just late last year. It's being interpreted now, and there's going to be some really interesting things come out of that, and we're just not in a position to release it just yet. But it certainly shows up to how significant that 20 kilometre long northeast trending zone going from Boda and Kaiser down in the southeast, right up to the thing we call Murga and Finns Crossing into the northwest. Just an aerial shot of the site. As I said, nice place to operate. Drill rig sitting in the middle of a wheat crop. rolling hills, and our biggest impediment's probably a wind farm which sits right over the top of the project site. But that's another story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. Look, it's always an absolute honour to hear from Ian directly, but we will take questions now if anybody has a burning question for Ian. We do have some roving microphones if you need it, but look, maybe I'll start with one while you're all warming up, and that is why New South Wales, Ian? For somebody, and you know, obviously with Alkane's long history in New South Wales, why did you come and why do you stay?
Well, I'll give you the factual story, not the fairy story. Basically, when I first got involved with Alkane, the guys approached me and they said, we've got control of this company, we don't know much about it. They inherited it by doing a swap with an oil company that they had, and said, would you go to New South Wales and spend a few weeks there and come back and tell us what you thought? So I spent a few weeks roaming around. I just kept being overwhelmed, you know, what I saw as the potential. And our initial targets were obviously orogenic gold, because that was our background in WA. And I went back and I said, guys, you know, if you have got the guts and the focus to come in to be in New South Wales and you commit to being here and you commit to putting a good team together, then I think the company could be very successful. And that's sort of how it evolved. There's been a few glitches along the way, but it's evolved.
I think never has anything been more correct. Thank you so much for that, Ian. We do have time for a few questions. Are you sure? Nobody? Okay, no problem. Oh, thank you. One down here in the front. Thank you, Kerry.
Ian, thanks. Great presentation. I know Alkane's been around for a while. Lots of news flow coming up. But from an investor point of view, just give us, I guess, a view of what's the news flow and why we should potentially get involved now with Alkane.
I guess there are two things, and you know, this is about Boda Kaiser. So I glossed over Tomingley. So Tomingley, the new discoveries we made south of Tomingley about 3 or 4 years ago, are now gone through evaluation. We bit the bullet and we did something that very few companies of our size have done in the past. We ran a decline from our Wyoming 1 open cut at Tomingley, 3 kilometres down to the top end of the system at Roswell. And the reason we did that was because we thought it was probably going to be a fairly long, drawn-out approval process, because the Newell Highway runs right across the middle of everything. And we thought, well, we can probably get permission and approval to go ahead and mine underground. And the really great thing about Roswell is it's a very high-grade deposit. And we put out an updated reserve statement about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and on it there we were showing zones of mineralisation which are plus 5 grams scattered all through the Roswell deposit. And Roswell will come on stream, physically come on stream as a mine within the next month and a half. And of course, having the decline there, we just whip the ore out straight through the Tomingley plant. So that's one big thing that's happening, and that'll scale up Alkane production to over 100,000 ounces in 26, and we can see another 8 years past that. That's without finding any more. As we found at Tomingley, we've now taken Tomingley down to about 400 metres, 500 metres vertical depth, and we keep finding more ore as we keep going. It's a classic orogenic gold deposit. Outside of that is Kaiser, more drill results to come out on Kaiser. In the past, in the recent 6 months, putting out spectacular gold copper drill results has almost meant no market reaction whatsoever. Total ignore. I think maybe that's changing, but we will be putting out those results. We'll have a revised Kaiser resource within, say, 3 weeks. That'll go into the global total. And then people will start to realise what a big system that Boda and Kaiser is. Following that, about another month, and the preliminary economic study is done, and we'll demonstrate to what the project is worth. And I think I'll explain now before somebody asks me the question is, are you looking at a huge scale operation, which means huge capital costs? And yes, we are, but we also looked at the deposits and we can see ways where we can scale down. So you can start with an open cut on Kaiser at a smaller scale operation, and then you just scale it up over time as it becomes successful. You have the plant, you will build the plant such that it can be expanded. So that's the that information should come out within let's say another month to month and a half.
Thank you. And a last question up the back here.
Ian, very interesting talk. The granite intrusives into the Ordovician age volcanics, what's the age of the granite? Is that also Ordovician or younger?
The monzonites, the mineralised monzonites at Boda and Kaiser have been dated around 440 million years, which puts them exactly the same age as, say, Cadia. So it's the same system. And, you know, when you look at these, you look at the chemistry, the lithogeochemistry, all that work we've done on it, you can classify them. And we can classify them according to that as to where they fit in our exploration profile. So things that don't stack up in the wrong rock type, the wrong chemistry, we probably give a lower priority to explore. But they're classic monzonite, as distinct from the granites. We've got a huge big granite to the southeast of us called the Wallumen granite, which is a carboniferous granite. Very different beast, totally different. Not like the monzonites that we see in the Boda Kaiser system.
And have you looked at the Badangara deposit, gold deposit just to the north?
Yeah, that was actually the first thing we did. When we acquired, I didn't talk much about the history, but we acquired the property off Rio Tinto in 2004 or 5. I can't remember, back a fair way. And the motivation initially was orogenic gold. You know, given our background at Tomingley, we thought there was potential for orogenic gold. We thought Badangara was an orogenic deposit. And so we had a good hard look at it. We drilled 20 or 30 RC holes into it along strike and got absolutely next to nothing. So it's not always successful. But at least it taught us something. It taught us something. On the back of that disappointment, we said, well, we've got this property. It's got lots of indications of being monzonite, porphyry, intrusive bodies and mineralisation, the old Kaiser mine, for example, outcropping mineralisation. So we went back and started from scratch and then just built up the story, drilled targets, finally zeroing back into the Boda area, and that's in 2019. I'll call it the discovery hole, but it's being a bit stretch the truth a bit.
Okay, look, thank you so much, Ian, and please thank Ian again. Thank you. And our next presentation is regarding the great company Sky Metals. It's developing a large-scale tin project, of course, in New South Wales. So here to present is Oliver Davies, a geologist and CEO who's worked with Sky since listing in 2019. He's previously worked in exploration and operational roles at Evolution and Alkane, and has worked closely on several successful New South Wales discoveries, including Evolution's significant expansion at Cal Gold Resource and Alkane's regional exploration success at Tomingley at Boda. Please welcome Ollie Davies.
Thanks, Lucy. It's a pleasure to be here tonight and talk to you guys about Sky Metals, and we're developing large-scale tin systems in New South Wales, and very importantly to feed global electrification. So what we can see there is a drone photo already over the old Tullabung tin mine, and just a quick disclaimer there, just a quick overview of the company, our board, very experienced, capable people in New South Wales who have been head of a number of mining projects. And then one of the key things on this slide is that we've already engaged Corkeries, who have been involved in a majority of the mining approvals in New South Wales in this last year. And 2023 saw about 5 mines approved in New South Wales. So it's definitely a state ready for new mining. So just to talk a little bit about tin, unlike talking about gold and copper, not many people know a lot about tin. And when you do talk about tin, this graph comes up a lot. So the key thing here is that tin is ubiquitous throughout all modern technology, and this means that as we make a move to global electrification, that more and more we're going to need more and more tin, and because it's ubiquitous through all of these technologies, it outstrips all of these other metals. And it's the silver bits that you see on solar panels, it's the solder in a lot of technology, so in a lot of ways it's a proxy to AI as well, as we need more and more computing power. So it's a very, very important technology at the forefront. And the tin price itself, it's worth 3 times as much as copper. At the moment, it's sitting quite steady around that 40,000 Aussie mark. and going up a little bit at the moment with some concerns in Indonesia. One of the key things about the tin price and the tin market is that tin itself, the tin price is inelastic. So if the tin price goes to $100,000 a tonne Aussie, everyone's still buying tin because you can't replace it as a solder, and your microwave's still going to cost $40. So everyone needs tin. It doesn't matter where the price goes, there's no replacements. And so it's a very open to the upside for any producers. There's also a very shaky supply situation for tin, where a majority of it comes out of China. About 20% of the world's tin comes out of Indonesia. Indonesia currently using a lot of offshore dredging and things, which is becoming increasingly embarrassing to the Indonesian government. And the Indonesian tin exports in the last couple of months have actually dropped 99%. So Indonesia's effectively no longer producing any tin. All of the rest of the countries there, Myanmar included, they're no longer exporting tin because they've had some political unrest. So it is a very shaky supply, and that's where Sky Metals comes in, looking for ethical and reliable supply. And where Sky Metals comes in is our historic Talabang tin project. So Talabang's pretty much right in the middle of New South Wales. It's not far from the actual geographic centre, and it is a big old tin mine. So what you can see in that aerial photo there is all of the alluvials taken off through the 1960s and 70s, but tin was actually discovered in the 1890s. And because of its really favourable metallurgy, it was very successfully mined right up until the 1980s. And this represents, being a historic site, it represents a lot of shortcuts for us. So there's power lines already to site, there's haul roads already coming in. So for us, we plug into this old infrastructure, and it represents us getting into production quickly, having these shortcuts ready to move quickly on. And because of the nature of the deposit, a lot of the historic hard rock mining hasn't actually exploited a lot of those hard rock resources very far. The veins themselves that they would have been mining are quite discontinuous. And so that hard rock resource underlying this large historic alluvial deposit is in place, and that's what we're exploring now. So this is a drone footage looking up north through the deposit. You can see the outline of the old open pit in orange, some of the old ROM dumps, and then the tailings dam out the back there. And the red outline is our current resource outline. So we've explored so far a very small footprint of what is a very, very large tin system, and there's a lot further for us to expand this resource into. If there's one thing to take away from this presentation, it is that Talabang represents what can be a very low-cost tin producer, and the things in its advantage are that low-cost mining, you've got tin veins outcropping at surface, they're shallow dipping as well, so they're very favourable for a nice open pit. Exceptional ore sorting upgrade. Ore sorting has been an absolute game changer for this deposit. It's exceptionally suited for this deposit, uniquely so, and it upgrades the resource 5 times. And we get rid of 80% of mass, which means that 80% of what we mine we don't process, which means our processing plant has to be a fifth of the size, and our operating costs through the processing plant are a fifth of what they would be otherwise. So there's big reductions in there. The actual processing itself, the guys who discovered this in the 1890s were gravity processing the tin here and making a concentrate. We're using the same process now. So it's a very simple process to do. It just uses water and spirals and things. It's very straightforward, and it's very, very low cost. And then once we make that tin concentrate, we see a very high payability. So a 50% tin concentrate sees over 95% payability. We're looking to make an over 60% tin concentrate, which often can see around 98% payabilities. So you're looking at a concentrate that has twice as much tin in it than a copper concentrate, and then it's worth 6 times as much. So it's a very valuable thing that we end up coming out with. And then now looking at the resource itself, so far we've defined 15.6 million tonnes at 0.15% tin, and we're looking at an exploration target of 23 to 32 million tonnes. But the real key thing here is the ore sorting upgrade, which we take 0.15% tin and we upgrade it to over 0.7% tin. For people unfamiliar with the value of tin, 0.7% tin's worth over 2.5 grams per tonne gold and over 2% copper. So it's a very, very valuable metal, and we're seeing it in good quantities when we upgrade it through the ore sorting. And then importantly, of course, this resource remains open in all directions, and we've got a maiden indicated resource as well now. So why is the metallurgy so good at Tullabung? It just comes down to how the tin has been put into the rock. So this is a picture of one of the tin veins at Tullabung, and you can see that we've got very coarse black cassiterite grains there. The cassiterite grains have a density of about 7 tonnes per cubic metre, and then the other rock around it has a density of about 2.7 tonnes per cubic metre. So there's a huge disparity between these two. And then we use X-rays to effectively measure the density of the rock passing through the ore sorter, and then the denser rocks that have the tin in it, those rocks get ejected and everything else gets rejected. And then just through using that simple process, we are able to upgrade the ore by 5 times. And the incredible thing as well that we're seeing at Tullabung is the recoveries through the ore sorter. We're effectively losing no tin. At the moment, we have a 98% recovery. That's calculated on the fact that our waste is below detection limit for the tin assay. So we use the detection limit to calculate how much tin is in there, but quite likely it's a lot better than that 98%. And then, as mentioned, that's getting rid of 4/5 of the mass. So we only need to build a plant that's 1/5 the size. And all of that means reduced CapEx, reduced OpEx, and makes us a very low cost producer in the future. So this is a video here of some of the Tullabung ore running through the ore sorter. So it goes over this mesh, makes sure there's nothing too small, gets sped up to 3 metres a second, it runs along this belt, goes underneath the X-rays, and then on the right-hand side of this, you can see the air jets flicking off the rocks, and on the left-hand side is the waste that's getting rejected, and the ore's on the right-hand side. So you can see the massive mass that's getting removed through this simple process, and that means that all of that really reduces our plant size and how much we need to process. And incredibly, we're seeing no tin at all coming through in that waste. So having a close-up look here at the waste, any geologist in the crowd will be able to say that scientifically that is boring grey rock. There is nothing doing in it. You don't want that. It's boring as. When you go over to the other side, to the ore, you can see it's shiny, right? That's the rock we want. So the ore sorter is doing a terrific job at picking those up, splitting those, and then doing an incredibly effective job of concentrating up our tin before we even start in the processing plant. A very robust, proven technology these days. These days it's a mature technology in tin, ore sorting. It's been in Australia's largest tin mine, Renison, for over 5 years now, working 24/7. There you can see the 2 ore sorters installed in Renison there. These things, when we went and visited Renison about sort of 6 months ago, these have been the only innovation at the Renison tin mine for about the last 50 years. And they sing their praises. They can't believe how much good these things are doing. The Renison ore is incredibly complicated. It's a fine-grained cassiterite. It's dispersed through the whole rock. It's a very tricky ore deposit. And it's incredible that the ore sorters work at all, to be honest, but they're working incredibly well. And the encouraging thing for us as well is that when they started using this technology and started looking at can ore sorters work, they were seeing a 10 to 15% mass rejection. When they installed them, after about 6 months, they actually increased that to 20 to 25%. So these things worked better when once installed and you had dedicated metallurgists looking at how to operate them properly on the ore. And unlike Tullabung, Renison is a very tricky deposit, but Tullabung's ore is absolutely perfect for this technology, and that's what our work is showing. TOMRA itself is a global business in New South Wales. If anyone's been to a return and earn, that's TOMRA. So their big business is actually recycling, and mining is a small part of it. But already they've installed 232 ore sorters globally. It's a massive mining business, and they're across the globe in a lot of operations, including tin. One of the world's largest tin mines, the San Rafael tin mine in Peru, they have ore sorters, and that takes some of their grade on the margins that they wouldn't be able to process otherwise. That upgrades it, and they can put that through the plant then. So it's very important in the San Rafael mine. It's very important down at Renison, And there's a number of operations throughout the globe that are beginning to use this technology, and it's a very mature technology now, and it's really the right time and right place for Tullabung and this technology. We started learning about ore sorting probably in 2021, and it was in the back end of 2021 that we got together a sample of Tullabung ore, and realising it was, from what we understood, absolutely ideal for ore sorting. We sent it for some initial test work, and we took a 0.19% tin sample and we upgraded it to over 0.7% tin. Then we followed up with a bulk sample. We got half a tonne and we said, does this work if we run a big chunk through it? So we did some high grade stuff there. We took a 0.29% tin sample and we took it up to 0.89% tin. We saw that 98% recovery coming up, and that's through a very large sample. So we have a very big sample size here to back up that. And then we wanted to know, does this work through the entire deposit? So we took samples from different depths across the strike, and all across the deposit, we put these samples, we ran them through separately through the TOMRA, and that's where we see, on average across the deposit, we see an over 5 times increase in grade. We see, again, that consistent over 98% recovery. We're pretty much seeing no detectable tin in the waste. And then we're seeing that 80% of mass rejected. So this is showing itself to be a really terrific technology for this deposit. It's a mature technology in tin, and it's just the right place, right time for Tullabung. As I mentioned before, once it goes through the ore sorter, it goes through a very conventional, straightforward tin circuit. As I said, this would have been used by the old timers back in the 1890s to make tin. So very straightforward process to then get ourselves to that saleable tin concentrate. And then in terms of the deposit itself as well, we do have some higher grade zones here. So we've got 60 metres at 0.5%, 60 metres at 0.3% tin. These are all in this higher grade lozenge that we see pretty much in the centre of the deposit. It's close to surface, and yeah, look, I only did a couple of years of mining engineering, but already you can see that that's where you'd start your pit, and that's where you'd want to get this deposit going from. So we have a nice high grade area that can mean that we have quick payback on capital. And then already we're seeing some easy expansions to this system as well. There's still a lot of workings at surface that we haven't drilled under, but in addition to those, that little sort of blue outline there, that's our current drilling extent for the 23 to 32 million tonne exploration target. And then in green, you can see where we saw some rock chip samples down one of the old open pits. The veins in there are averaging over 2% tin, and no one's drilled under them. And then we drilled a couple of groundwater monitoring bores to start our environmental permitting process. These were planned to be well outside any conceptual open pit. It would be embarrassing if we weren't happy about it, but we did hit some tin in those as well. So it's a very extensive system, and both of those have more than doubled the width of the mineralisation in those areas. So some significant expansions to be tested and to get this deposit into very, very large. So this is just the drone footage now running through the old ROM, up over the machinery shed and into the southern lead of the old mine. And our next steps are very, very straightforward. We need a bit more drilling to get this resource up and get to what we think is a critical mass for mining. We'll work more on those high-grade zones, finding more high-grade zones and getting those into indicated so that we have some good early stuff for mining. Some more bulk sampling as well. We're already improving on the processing that we're doing on this exceptional deposit, but we think we can make more improvements with more work, and we'll continue to strive for that, because that is crucial in making this such a low-cost project. And then on the back of these works, we'll be releasing our mining studies, feasibility things, and we're already going through commencing our mining approvals and things as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ollie. What an exciting tin project. Any questions from the floor? Maybe I'll start with a quick one while you're warming up. So, Ollie, what are the plans for the next, say, 6 to 12 months?
I think ideally we'd really like to get a bit more drilling done. That will get us to this critical mass of a resource. And then from there, hopefully in the next sort of 6 to 12 months, we can start releasing feasibility studies and things. And these are obviously crucial for us to begin communicating to the broader market about how economic we think the deposit is, how capex efficient we think it is, all of these advantages that are open to us thanks to that really unique deportment of the tin in that cassiterite.
Thank you. We've got one question up the back. Any others? Ian, here we go.
Thanks, Ollie. I mean, that seemed like a very surprising coarse crush that you're feeding through that tomra. Is the cassiterite really that coarse that it just gets flicked out? I mean, looking at those images, I would have thought you're losing 90% of your ore, but that's where I'm naive. Yeah.
Ian, I think you've probably been following us for a while, and you know that we did look at this deposit in 2019. And one of the issues we had is that we have these really high-grade veins. They can be running sort of 10% tin, but then you have about 5 metres of wall rock, and then you have another vein. And what the ore sorter's really doing is getting rid of that wall rock between the veins and then upgrading it. So that's it's sort of solved what we thought was the issue with the deposit, basically. And then, the cassiterite itself being so coarse just means that downstream processing then, we don't need to do a tin float, which a lot of tin operations do need to. I think you might know better than me, but copper reagents for copper floats are about $5 a kilo. The reagent for a tin float's about $14 a kilo. So it's a very expensive process. The chemical is quite nasty. And so if you have a deposit that can avoid that, it makes it much, much cheaper. And that's what we have given that coarse cassiterite.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question? What is the timing on announcing resources, and what sort of annual production do you think you'll get?
So the timing for a resource upgrade, we'll be drilling in the next month or so. Then we'll be drilling for a month or two. It'll take us a couple of months to get results. So maybe in 6 months' time we can have an updated resource, maybe a little bit longer. And then in terms of... sorry, I forgot what the second part of the question was. Can someone help me? Annual production. Well... some cleverer people than me will work out what will work best for us, but we're sort of hoping for an operation somewhere in the order of sort of 3,000 to 5,000 tonne of tin per annum. That would be, at the moment, Renison produces about 8,000 tonne of tin, and Metals X sees half of that. So we'd be a significant size producer in the Australian market, similar to Metals X.
Thank you. And last question down the front.
There is a bit of interest. Obviously, given that the tin supply is very shaky, a lot of downstream users are looking upstream now to lock in supply. So I think as we continue to de-risk this project, there'll be growing interest in that, but already we're getting some.
Thanks, Ollie, for the presentation. Quick question. Have you reached a stage where you've got a reasonable idea of the source and the geological model for the cassiterite source?
I would really love to go on about how we found topaz in one of our deeper holes and things, but usually I don't get the ability to talk such geological stuff. But we did drill some deeper holes in 2019 looking for a tin porphyry system at depth. Some recent petrography on that, looking at those holes at depth, has actually found that we have topaz, which means that, for people who don't know, topaz means that we're getting deeper and hotter in the system. So we think actually we might be a bit closer to sort of that Gryson area where we may have a deeper, higher grade tin deposit. But we certainly can see that there's a granite underneath this deposit running a very large tin lode system. In that hole where we were looking for the tin porphyry, we actually just hit more of the tin lode system. So it just showed us that it's extensive for sort of 400 or 500 metres at depth. So,
is there any tungsten with it?
There is a bit of tungsten, particularly as you sort of get a bit deeper in the system. We're sort of getting we do get sort of % tungsten hits, and we get a bit of zinc and we get a bit of silver as well. But very much we're focused on the tin, and those things are going to be sort of icing on the cake, if you like.
Okay, well, look, thank you so much again to Ollie Davies. Thank you. And last but definitely not least, we are delighted to have the amazing Jeneta Owens provide a presentation on Godolphin resources. Jeneta is a geologist with near 20 years' experience in mining and exploration, working on a range of deposit styles and commodities. For more than a decade, her particular focus has been on the porphyry copper gold and epithermal gold in New South Wales, including lead exploration activities at North Parkes mine and, of course, Sandfire Resources New South Wales projects, before heading her own geological consultancy. For close to 3 years now, Jeneta has been Managing Director for Godolphin Resources, a critical minerals-focused explorer in Eastern Australia. Please welcome Jeneta.
Step up there. Thank you, Lucy. Okay, so I've got the typical disclaimer with lots of words on a page that I'm not going to read out. You can find this on our website. Just a quick overview of our corporate snapshot and what our corporate structure looks like. Again, I'm not going to go into any of this in detail. You can grab this on our website. But what I would like to point out, and you can see that in our major shareholders, that we do have 2 other ASX-listed companies in our top 5 shareholders, which is pretty unique for a junior exploration company. And I think that goes to the testament of the quality of our projects. So a little bit of an investment highlight. So what is different about Godolphin? Why are we a great exploration company here in New South Wales? And really, I think it's about our focus on critical minerals and looking within New South Wales for opportunities to increase our portfolio. We started off as a copper and gold explorer, and we have now advanced into rare earths and other critical minerals. And we really have a team of discovery-focused geologists within our group, and they have a very strong technical background and that really discovery-focused philosophy. So that really does set us up well for exploring and developing projects. Now you can see from the map here, and you've probably seen this map from Ian's project presentation earlier as well. We are located in a really prominent position here in New South Wales in the Lachlan Fold Belt. So we have a large tenement package between Orange and Dubbo, which is our copper and gold focused portfolio. We have the Gundagai Gold Project, and more recently, in the last couple of years, we've really been focused on our rare earth project and building up that portfolio. We have a large tenement area there in Temora, around Temora, and also some tenements further north in New South Wales. So Narrabri has really turned out to be our flagship asset. We have just recently knotted up our 51% ownership, which is a great milestone for the company and one that we were looking forward to announcing. Now, we got involved in this project as an earn-in around 2 years ago, and at that point in time it had a really old 2004 JORC-compliant resource that was based on basically the Dubbo zirconia model. So they were looking at zircons and gallium and all of these really interesting things. Now, when we actually did the due diligence on the project, we could see that really what they had done was only ever drilled air core, and they really hadn't even hit basement. They really didn't understand what the project was that they were looking at. They'd only ever drilled clays, and very sticky clays at that. So we thought there was an opportunity to actually look at this project differently, take a different deposit model style, and apply that philosophy to the exploration and development of this project. Now, what turned out after our first drilling campaign, so we, back 2 years ago now, when we took on the project, we got straight into drilling. We drilled 4 diamond holes so that we could start doing some early metallurgy, because that's really vitally important in these types of projects. What we wanted to know, and it's a really simple question, right? Because there's 2 types of rare earth projects, and we sort of call them hard rock and clay. Hard rock means it doesn't leach, and you have a really high capex cost to get it up and running. So we're talking, $1.5 to $2 billion plant, okay? And that may not be something that we're going to get a lot of in this country or around the world. In fact, that's a lot of investment. So if it does leach, it means that we have the potential for a leaching project, which the capex is only around 100, 120 million. So that was a really exciting prospect. So we sent off 6 samples from those original 4 diamond holes, and they did leach. And in fact, they leached quite well, which was really encouraging. We were already in the paddocks drilling another 29 diamond holes at that point in time, and the idea was to update our resource. So you can see the numbers there. So I still call it our maiden drilling campaign. It was 2 very close together, but we got 94.6 million tonnes at 739 ppm TREO, and that also included a 20 million tonnes at over 1,000 ppm TRE, so a high-grade pod, which was really very important. Now, in this maiden resource that we put out, we also were able to achieve 50% indicated. So that was really, really important, because that gives us our next step into starting mining studies. You need to have that category. We also have a large inferred resource as well. Now, what I would like to point out in this picture that you can also see is that our resource was cut off, let's say, by the tenement boundary. So we can't report anything that sits outside of our tenement boundary, but it was also just in the indicated category, so that was okay. So you can see the numbers there, 126% uplift in the TREO grade from that older 2004 resource. And that's, again, maiden drill campaign. We got 30% increase in tonnage, and we also had a 50% of that indicated resource, which previously there was none. So that's a really, really good step for your first maiden drill campaign. So we have really been working closely with ANSTO and working with those guys to actually develop our leaching technologies and our diagnostic leaching test. So they did those first 6 samples, and they were based on 1 metre samples, so individual 1 metres down through not each drill hole, a couple of drill holes and across the deposit. And that was that, does it leach or not? Once we found out that it did, we wanted to know, well, obviously we're not going to mine it in 1 metre intervals, so what happens if we put a whole big chunk in there and leach that? And so we did another 15 samples composited, and then we were able to get these amazing results. So you can see there the average ranges were between 80 to 95% extraction, and we really have been focused on those key magnet minerals. So they're the minerals that are used for permanent magnets, and they're used, and the demand for permanent magnets is expected to 3-fold, triple-fold in the next 10 to 20 years with technologies that are designed for decarbonisation. We use them a lot in things like wind turbines, electric vehicles, but everything from your mobile phone, anything that has a GPS device. So they really are an important part of future technologies. Now, we also did some size fraction work. Now, Ollie had some really cool information about ore sorting. We've done that on a slightly smaller scale. We don't have a lovely ore sorting machine. But what we wanted to know was, does the rare earth minerals, do they sit in a certain size fraction? So is there a way that we can upgrade our grade by screening and getting rid of a portion that we don't actually have to leach? And again, this is just the first step in these types of investigations, but it really did show that we could double the grade by doing a small screening process up front. So that means that we could potentially get rid of 80% of the mass without actually getting rid of any of the rare earth elements, and then put it into leaching. So that's going to be something we're obviously going to investigate further down the track. And it really does show that we might be able to have a really profitable, low capital cost development potential. Now, the image that you can see there is actually our samples when they were being leach tested at ANSTO, and they look a little bit like milkshakes, but you don't want to drink them. So getting a little bit more techie here, we have spoken about it being a clay-hosted project. We were very fortunate because we are the only clay-hosted project in New South Wales, and obviously that means a lot to the New South Wales government to understand this type of a deposit and how it may be, how they might be able to find more elsewhere in New South Wales. So they actually took all of our 31 diamond drill cores down to Londonderry and they high-logged them for us. So that gave us from top to bottom mineralogy. And what you can see, and just to keep it really simple, is that all of that red from top to bottom is all kaolin clay, and that is very important in hosting rare earth mineralisation. Most of the iron-absorbed clay deposits that people would know about, they need this kind of mineral, and the rare earth individual elements will stick on the outside of it. So we've got that. What we don't quite have is that our rare earth minerals actually aren't exactly stuck on the outside. It's called adsorbed. Ours are slightly inside, but there's enough of them hanging out so they can be liberated, and we've done that testing. So that's why we're getting such great recoveries. So we are not exactly ionic, but we're pretty darn close. Now, to follow that up, ANSTO also did some QEM scan for us. And what that means is that they were able to see the mineralogy, and that really helps us understand what is leaching and how. And what we could see is that we really have this microcrystalline rare earth minerals, which is why the screening worked so well and we were able to upgrade. So I mentioned that we could double our grade, and in some instances, one particular sample, we were able to increase that by 400%, which is amazing, right? So doing this kind of work at this early stage really lets us understand the deposit and how we might be able to develop it. Now, I mentioned before that you saw where the resource outline was in relation to the tenement boundary. So, that obviously was a concern to us. So we wanted to pick up more ground, and we'd obviously been actively looking for ground that might become available in the area. And we've picked up Trungley, which surrounds that project, Cambrai on the east, and we also have Bingara in the north of New South Wales. So I'll just pop this one on to show you. So you can see the centre of the image there is the actual Narrabri resource, and we now have all of that ground that's hatched there in red, but also everything that's in a polygon is a part of our Narrabri project. That's 40 kilometres north-south and about 20 kilometres east-west, and much of that is prospective for rare earth clay-hosted mineralisation. Now we do know, and it's hard to show in a 2D kind of format, that Narrabri itself is outcropping granite hills, and there's a natural gradient to the northwest towards a creek in the distance. Now, all of that area is really prospective for rare earth elements, because as the granite weathers, the rare earths are released and they get stuck on the clay particles and they move all around in the weathered profile. And obviously with gravity, they go downhill. So it's really, really fantastic that we've been able to pick up all of this ground. We also knew that the resource extends into the tenement to the north, and now we have that ground as well. Now moving back to our copper, gold and base metals projects, so this is the ground in and around Orange. We do have a very large tenement package, and late last year we did some work on our Yeovil and Goodrich. Now I'm just, some numbers there that you can see from the Yeovil resource itself. If we were to put those numbers together and use the same calculation that Ian used for Boda, it would actually be higher grade. Mind you, they've got 500 million tonnes and we've got 12, but we don't have 200 kilometres of drilling. So apples and oranges. Much earlier stage, but yeah, really, really great project. Copper Hill East, again, is south of Alkane's Boda and Kaiser project. And again, we've got the same Ordovician Molong volcanic belt rocks. Work that we've done there has indicated that we've got the same age intrusives as Cadia, Boda, Kaiser. So really, really prospective ground. And Gundagai, we haven't done any work on recently, but we do still have that. It's an orogenic gold project down there in the southern part of the Lachlan Fold Belt. So a nice picture of some shiny core. Any geologist loves to see that coming out of a hole, especially when you've been drilling the previous 12 months on a clay-hosted project, because clay is not pretty and it's not fun. So from a geological perspective. So getting some nice chalcopyrite in our drill holes is always good to see, and you can see the results there. Yeovil is an amazing tenement. It's over 20 kilometres strike length of copper mineralisation, and so that's occurrences at surface, old historic workings by the old timers. You can walk up and find malachite, which is a copper mineral poking out of the ground. Really, really exciting. And we have drilled a couple of holes, and we've got some really interesting hits. You know, it's not often that you get over 1% copper in a drill hole, and you know, all of our holes that we have drilled, we have managed to do that. Specifically on Goodrich, which I will move on to. No, I won't. So Goodrich itself, when we drilled the hole there, we drilled 2 holes into the project. I'll just move back so it doesn't confuse you. Oops. One hole went into and under the old workings, and we intersected copper and magnetite, high grade, which was typical of what the old timers were mining. What we also drilled was a hole from south in towards the deposit, and we actually intersected disseminated copper mineralisation 20 metres from surface. So this is completely a different style of mineralisation than what has ever been seen at Goodrich before. So typically you see that high grade stuff, and that's pretty attractive, but limited in size potential. Now, that particular hole went through a fault, and then we hit, you know, the similar kind of mineralisation that was typical at Goodrich. So I really like that project in the fact that we have now identified a different mineralisation style, and these high-grade pods of chalcopyrite and magnetite quite commonly sit off to the side of a porphyry deposit. So I've seen this kind of thing elsewhere in New South Wales, and I think that potentially the high-grade ore at Goodrich has been taking people's attention away from where the actual very large porphyry may be. So that's something that we're obviously going to follow up in the future. Moving on, we are, you would have seen that we've announced that we've done a deal to sell Lewis Ponds. So Lewis Ponds is one of our most advanced copper and gold base metals projects. And now that deal does include the entire tenement, and the deal is actually over a period of time to allow us to have non-dilutive funding to continue exploration activities across the rest of our large portfolio and move those things forward. So that's a really, really positive step for Godolphin. Just to show you a bit of our timeline that we've got set from February until July, so the next 6 months, we are going to be doing a mining study on Narrabri. So we have got enough information now to put in some inputs for the engineering companies to come up with some numbers. And that's really around us trying to understand whether it can be economic and what the next steps are. You know, we obviously have a feeling because we've seen all the results, and we obviously have compared ourselves to peers in this space. So we're feeling pretty confident, but we just want to have some numbers around that. We're going to be, a part of that project, we'll be doing some more metallurgical test work with ANSTO. So we've done the diagnostic testing, which is the first stage, and now we need to move up the game and get into slurry testing. So that's a bigger sample and testing on those leaching parameters there. We're going to do more mineralogy. It was really, really helpful for those first few samples that we did to understand the mineralogy. We worked out that, yes, we did have some monazites and xenotines, but under leach conditions, they don't leach. So all of the rare earths that we were getting aren't from those minerals. So that's really handy to know. But also, because we're not leaching monazites or xenotines, we don't really have a high thorium or uranium problem. So that's really positive as well. We obviously want to increase the size of the resource, and we need to do some more diamond drilling to do that. We do choose to do diamond, which is again quite unusual for a clay-hosted rare earth project, but we've found that by doing diamond drilling, we get a really quality sample. We can use that not just for the assays, but we can use it also for the metallurgical testing that we need to do, and it actually can drill into bedrock, and that's been really helpful to understand the geology of the region by doing that as well. So we'll have those results coming out over the next 6 months, and along with some results from some surface work that we're planning to do on our Copper Hill East and Yeovil tenements. And that's me for today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Another great presentation. So look, again, a few minutes for questions. There's one there from Trent.
Thanks, Jeneta. It's Trent from GBA. Can you talk a bit more about the geology of Narrabri? What I mean, are the rare earths transported, or is it more like in situ weathering of a Jurassic alkaline, like an exhalative? That's the first one.
Yeah, so it's a Devonian peralkaline granite, which is the Narrabri granite that is actually weathering in situ. There's other, I guess, varieties of granite, because generally you have a few different varieties of the same suite in the same area. So we look at A-type granites and the in situ weathering through the very thick weathering profile, and over a very long period of time releases the rare earths from the granite as it breaks down, so rock turning to soil, and they start attaching themselves to the clay particles and moving around in that weathered profile. So that's exactly as you were mentioning. Yeah.
Okay. Have you done any testing of the granite source? Is it enriched in rare earths also?
So I mentioned that we were doing diamond drilling, and so we are drilling into the bedrock. So we do have those samples, and it does show that it's enriched, but it's not to the percent degree that you would need to mine. So the whole idea around mining a clay deposit is that you just go and dig it up. There's no drill and blast, so you don't have those costs. You just pick it up with a shovel and put it in a truck and take it away. So that really reduces the costs of production.
Okay, I've got one more. Just in terms of your post-recovery basket of rare earths, what percentage of the magnet rare earths do you have?
It's variable, and we haven't sort of done an average at this point in time. It's around about the 26%.
Okay, thank you.
And Murray.
Murray Hutton from Geos Mining. On the theme of International Women's Day, I am proud to say that we have a majority of females on our staff, and it's all great. And can I say congratulations that we have our first female host of this. I must say that you are infinitely more easy on the eye than Julian. May you return many times. Question for Jeneta. You come across a lot of companies reporting rare earth resources, and they all just report it as total rare earth oxides. As we know, some are worth a hell of a lot of money and others are as cheap as dirt. Is there a better way of reporting these resources so that investors understand which rare earth resources are worth more than others?
Yeah, that's a great question, Murray.
I don't ask stupid questions, Jeneta.
Nice. Look, there is no standard, and we actually, when we started, working on this project, we did a lot of research of what other companies in Australia were actually, how they were reporting it, so that we could report in a similar way, so that it was easier for investors to actually compare one project to the other. But you're right, people know that cerium is not worth a lot, and a lot of these projects have a lot of cerium in them. Our particular project does have cerium. It doesn't really leach that well, so it's not such of a concern for us. But in saying that, when Lynas got together, and one of the first offtake deals they did was with a French company, and it was for cerium. And if they didn't have that, when things went pear-shaped, they would have went pear-shaped. So it's only that they had that agreement in place for something that we think is worthless that actually Lynas is still here today. So, 6 to 1, half a dozen of the other. But I do believe that we need to have an industry standard for reporting these elements, definitely. There's just not one at this point in time. And I know that there's a group a consultant group over in Perth that have mentioned this and are working on something. So it's in progress.
Thank you. And one quick question from me, Jeneta. Why the change in focus for the company from copper gold to critical minerals?
Well, I guess Ian sort of maybe come across or said something earlier today that made me laugh, because he said critical minerals, it's basically the whole periodic table. So I'm an explorer, right? So we want to explore for metals, the whole periodic table, except gold. So we do consider tin, copper, rare earths, and lithium, all of those sorts of things are considered critical minerals. And we're focusing on that because that's the future. It is the future of the country, the world. We all know that there's got to be, there's going to be a big transition to decarbonisation, and these particular minerals are really important to that. And we don't have enough. And yes, today we might have enough, but what we know that we're going to need for the future, we just don't have it. And if we sit back and wait for the need to be there, we're going to be on the back foot. We need to be on the front foot as a country. So that's why we're in that space.
Thank you.
Could I ask which are your most common rare earth elements?
That would be cerium and yttrium. So they're the most in abundance. But they're not the most that we leach out. So what goes in doesn't actually come out in the same way. Yeah.
No other questions, ladies and gentlemen? No? Okay, thank you, and thank you again to Jeneta.
Thank you.
So look, thank you so much for that amazing presentation of three great companies in New South Wales, and especially to our three presenters tonight who have all travelled into and around the state to make it here tonight. So please, one more thanks to our great presenters. I'd also like to thank again our sponsors and in fact mention the exciting news that we have a new sponsor as of very recently, and that is Stop Network, and we'll be hearing more about them in the media space. I'd also appreciate the honour of hosting tonight and let you know that the next event is of course that first Tuesday of April, the 4th of April, and it will be a lunch, of course, just down the road at the Ivy Ballroom, and it will be Pembroke Resources, a coal company based in Queensland, and it will be Barry Tudor who'll be doing the presentation there. The tickets are on sale, so we really do hope to see you there. So look, I'd like to wish you a good night. Thank you so much again for attending. I really look forward to seeing you all again. I do hope it's less than another 27 years before there is another female up here. But look, what I would like to do is now hand over to Will Jeffries, who will be presenting our next Leading Edge. But thank you so much and good night from me.
Well, Lucy, I can assure you it won't be 27 years until another female, of course, hosts a Sydney Mining Club event, and we look forward to you hosting the next Leading Edge event. I just wanted to say thank you, Murray, for your question. I spend every day with Julian Malnick, the founding chairman of 27 years, in the same room as him, Murray. I can assure you he's not soft on the eyes. But what Julian did do is he was the founder of the world's first deep sea mining company. And today's event is about the future of mining in New South Wales. Well, 1 month ago to this day, there was a big update on the future of mining in New South Wales. Offshore mining in New South Wales was banned in a bipartisan move by the Labor and the Liberal government, and that's something that hasn't been talked about. Julian started Nautilus Minerals to mine nodules under the water, copper, nickel, zinc, cobalt. Is being done now in places like Papua New Guinea, Tonga and Fiji. Meanwhile, offshore wind projects are allowed off the Illawarra and off the Hunter. Interestingly, yesterday, Chris Bowen, our dear Energy Minister, announced that the Southern Ocean offshore wind zone would go from 5,000 kilometres squared to 1,000 kilometres squared because of concerns about the impact of offshore wind on whale migration, a concern that he dismissed in June last year. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. The future of mining, as we've seen from Alkane Resources, Sky Metals, and of course Godolphin Resources, is very prosperous onshore, but offshore, forget about it. Thank you very much. Pembroke Resources next month. Looking forward to it.